Welcome everyone to episode 291 of Just Joshing, the Sparkle edition of Just Joshing, I should say, because I am your host, Joshua Pantellaresco, and this is a big show today, actually. First off, my guest is amazing. Kari Maaren is a Aurora Award finalist. The first of my Aurora Award finalists I'm interviewing over the next 8 episodes, which are really, really cool. When we get to episode 297, we shift to a 2-part before the big 300, but Kari is great. She's also running against me this year. You can vote for her, myself, and many others today as the Aurora Awards, the finals, are decided literally today. Feel free to vote. I will be there in Ottawa, whether I win again or whether I'm just there just to enjoy the finals. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be great. But it's not all. I have a couple of sponsors. Claude Morgan. I'm giving away The Decadence of Our Souls, the first of 2 books from Claude this month. It was awesome. I met him at When Worlds Collide, and he wanted to be a part of this podcast. And honestly, it was really cool to have him. He was episode 290 last week, and he's going to be sponsoring the podcast from here on in. Also, you may notice that Jeremy Berkeley is starting to do voiceovers for my ads. In light of this, Third Space is also a sponsor this month. Third Space Podcast is one of my favorite little podcasts. Kevin Weir and Jeremy Berkeley do a hell of a job. And as always, I have a blast listening to them. And I was hoping they'd be finalists this year as well. They do a great little thing. So there's them. Indie Imprint, of course, is my sponsor as well. So you're going to hear them as well. So I think before we get into more details, let's just get to the conversation, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
This podcast is sponsored by Claude Morgan. Claude Morgan is the author of 2 novels, The Decadence of Our Souls and Water Entanglement. Decadence of Our Souls is a cross between a spiritual book and a thriller, and Water Entanglement deals with the concept of water scarcity. It is also a thriller. What would you do when you realize that water has memory? Water is alive, and the time for her to awaken is now. Both novels are available in ebook or print format through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any other major bookstore chain. The audiobook is coming soon. More info at claudiomorgan.com.
Sometimes you still kind of screw up. So, I officially turned the recorder on. If there's anything incriminating you'd like to say, make it good.
Excellent.
That's a very interesting way of pleading the fifth. It's like, excellent. How you doing?
All right. How are you?
I'm good. It's just I always figure, like, you know, it's important to approach an interview with a certain level of seriousness to get started, because that way, in theory, I hope it makes the person comfortable.
Sure.
So, congratulations on your nominations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Same to you.
Yeah. So, so I'm going to ask this: how long have you been doing comics?
I first started putting comics on the internet in 2006.
Wow, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what got you into comics?
I've just always liked them. When I was a little kid, one of the ways I would tell stories, I used to sneak off to the library to read Superman comics because our parents wouldn't let us have comics, or very many comics, because they thought little girls shouldn't read comics, at least not Superman comics. So I sat in the stacks reading Superman comics. It was very edgy for a 10-year-old girl, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my god! No, you just get a really big impression. So telling somebody what you can't do, it's like, you can't do that. You're like, really? Challenge accepted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they never said we couldn't do it. They just didn't approve of superhero comics. So.
Well, that's unfortunate. So what era of Superman were you reading?
I what I remember is that they had these big anthologies at the library, so they were sort of starting in back at the beginning in the 30s, and then going to maybe the 70s.
See, my favorite era of Superman's like the 60s, 70s, early 80s. Because that Superman is most fun. Because I mean, like, just for me, it's like stuff like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, where Jimmy becomes a different monster, gets in all kinds of weird troubles. I mean, it's a wacky book. I mean, it just is. But it's so fun.
Yes. And then in the 80s and 90s, he got all grim and dark and emo.
Well, I kind of still like with Superman. I kind of saw the. I mean, he had been around for like 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And doing a different take on him was not necessarily a bad idea. And I started reading comics in the 1989. So that was probably DC at around one of its most creative periods in history. The grim and emo stuff didn't start till after that. But the early so doing the reboot wasn't necessarily a terrible idea. It's funny. We laugh at Superman from that era. We laugh at Batman from that era, right? But those eras are probably some of the most fondly remembered ones, which is funny to me. Come on, Adam West doing the Bat 2C is still makes my day every time I see it. But I mean, I think they knew back in the 60s. Like it was just about having fun. Telling good literature in comics is definitely a thing. Like what comics can be. Watchmen changed the game. And Watchmen's a great book. It's phenomenal. Unfortunately, I think this is what happened with a lot of companies is they decide instead of trying something using the tools Watchmen used, they decide let's just copy Watchmen.
Well, they copied it badly also. The Watchmen is actually kind of mocking the darkness of superheroes, and like it's mocking superheroes in general, and the darkness is not the main point of Watchmen, but people were like, ooh, that's dark, let's do that. And by missing the point of Watchmen, they kind of created that new kind of grim, dark approach to comics.
Yeah, instead of just having comics find their own voices. Like, I really, don't get me wrong, books with darker undertones can be really fun. Neil Gaiman's Sandman, for example, is a great book. It's fantastic. Yeah. But, I mean, another run that's kind of very fun is Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis' Justice League run. I mean, that book does not take itself seriously at all. Right? And, but it's really good. Especially, I think the first 30, 40 issues are amazing stuff. I've interviewed J.M. I mean, it's some of his most... He has a really fond memory of that. And it was just... I think it was just comics... Comics were still allowed to be very creative, but Watchmen changed the imagery of it. And we actually, I think, are due for another book like it in the industry. Not Watchmen, not necessarily Watchmen, but something that takes the tools we have today and creates a very different voice. Because comics desperately need it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But that's just my opinion, though. I just being a fan of the medium. But going back to you, so you were reading that. So did you start drawing after that, or did you just keep trying other literature? Did you try to write first?
All of the above. I mean, it wasn't just Superman comics. We did have comics in our house. We had lots of Peanuts, and I was obsessed with those for a while because and newspaper comics in general. And sometimes when I was telling stories, I would draw them. I would draw little comics in imitation of the newspaper comics. But I also have always written. I still do, of course. I have a novel and so on. But it's always just been. I like to live in all the ways that I can. Sometimes with pictures.
Well, I personally can understand that mentality. I don't draw well My Stick Figures Revolt. I literally have a story right now. That's a comic book story. It's a Dr. Seuss thing where my stick figures revolt against their creator for being drawn so poorly. Because, I used to make that as a joke. It's like, it would be a good story. And turns out it is. But writing like Dr. Seuss hurts your head. Just fair warning.
Yes.
Yes. But, no, so, because, like I said, if you didn't, so... Is comics your first medium, your first kind of love, or do you have a preference of what you do?
I think my first love is long form storytelling, like novels. Comics were, sorry, it's hard to express words. Words are hard. Comics are probably my second love, but not by much. Like the hierarchy is very, very slight. I love writing novels. I feel like I get right into the world, and it just it's a kind of writing that you have this story that kind of comes out of you, and you have to get all the bits together, and it's just kind of fun to do and fun to create a large world like that. But comics, different feel to them, but a feel that's just as fun. Like, because I do webcomics, and it's literally 4 panels at a time, and yet I do tell long form stories out of them. It's sort of taking the principles of writing a novel and stretching it out over years, and telling it in teeny weeny little pieces, which I kind of enjoy doing. I am a pantser for both novels and comics, which isn't always the best thing.
No, well, it can be a lot of fun. Like I always, when I do my novels, I always have an ending and a beginning in mind, right? I mean, I had it perfectly crystal clear, but I have my ending in mind, right?
Yeah.
And I have usually my beginning in mind. Right, and then in the middle, it's just like, I don't know where I'm going, right?
Yeah, that's my approach too.
Yeah, the thing is, you do make messes doing it like that. It's just part of the deal. But I always tend to think of things kind of like, chocolate chip cookies was an accident. A wonderful accident, but it was an accident nonetheless when it started. And I'm not afraid to discover my own chocolate chip cookies in the process of making my mistake, and that's how I always look at it. I'm writing a story right now about a racing-sized star, and getting to that, I mean, I know there's a lot of pieces right now, especially where I am right now in the novel, that I'm going to cut. Like, it's just, I know, but right now I'm like, you know what? I can make any mess I want. I'm going to put everything down I can. I can make it a cohesive story afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's I often find when I am writing something, it's sort of like that kind of process. It's, some people call it the headlights method or the flashlight method. You're shining a light into the darkness ahead of you, and you don't know what's beyond the light, but you can see a little bit ahead of yourself, and you just follow the damn flashlight, and eventually get to the end. And once you're at the end, often you have to go back and say, oh, this is a bit messy, you need another scene in here, that doesn't make any sense, there's something in this, there's something contradictory in this character arc, etc., and that I love that aspect of writing in a way. I mean, the editing process can be maddening, but also it's fun to make the story better and fill in the holes and make it more satisfying. With webcomics, you can't do that because you're writing the story a bit at a time. So the trick is to do that process without going back and fixing all of.
Oh, that could be well, with a webcomic, I guess it depends. Like, if you, like, the thing is, telling especially a long form story, I mean, as a webcomic, right? You just accept the fact that there's going to be divergences from time to time. It's going to happen, right? So you can do one of two things. You can go, oops, and sometimes that's funny. right? It's like, oops, you know that path we went on? We are going to go another way now. Because I'm stuck, and I'm not good enough to get out of this hole. Or it's like, I suck. The audience will laugh, and, you know, you'll keep your tears to yourself. Or, right, sometimes it's like, you know what? I've done this enough. Let's just do something else, and let's just have fun with it. Didn't we? And then you can have your characters go, weren't we over here last week? Don't worry about it. Just don't. Shh. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about a scenario anymore. We're doing this. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I always used to love that, like, about Simpsons, like, way back when Simpsons was actually good, right? They would do something that wouldn't make any sense, and the characters would just honestly say, this makes no sense. Where did the booze come from? Right? Where did this come from? Why are we here? And then you'd have, like, Homer or somebody else answer. It's like, don't worry about it. Just go with it. It's fun. And I mean, and that's the cool thing about webcomics too, is like you can read something. Like I love Webtoon as an app. You'll read something, and you'll do it in bunches, and it's really, really good. Like it also takes a lot of guts to do what they're doing, but even if they make a mistake somewhere down the road, right? It's not insurmountable usually, or sometimes it adds to the appeal. It's one of the advantages of a webcomic over, say, a printed issue, is you get the opportunity to, like, it feels rawer. It almost feels realer in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it does, and I think it can be fun for the audience too. Sometimes they will catch your little flubs. They will usually catch your little flubs more than you will. It's like, oh, but don't you remember on the 13th of October 2016 when this thing happened, and you're not doing that now? And so you take it as a challenge and create an improbable reason that the thing is different than it was in 2016.
Oh.
It becomes a collaborative process.
Actually,
I had to do that. It was deliberate.
It was totally deliberate. It's like, again, you have tears in your eyes. You're going, how did they catch that? How did I miss that? Actually, you gave me an idea. If I ever do a webcomic, I'll actually create a character called the continuity machine. Basically, every time I screw up, that character shows up. It's almost like, it'll look like a troll. It's like, hey, you remember when you did this? I did not do that. Looks back. Did exactly that. Well, shit. There's just awkward minutes later, right? It's like, well, I gotta fix this now. Can I fix this? Am I good enough to fix this? No. We're gonna keep we're gonna keep going. Wait, what? It's like, yeah, we're gonna keep going. I screwed up. Like I said, that's the thing about art, right? I mean, the other thing too, about continuity, especially in comics, I think as long as you're consistent in the story you're telling in that moment. I used to be one of those really stickler for continuities. I do think, like, as you're telling your story, you can't cheat your audience from the story you're telling, right? But once you've told one story, right, and you want to tell a different story, you can reset the continuity. Especially if you tell the audience up front you're resenting the continuity. There is no mistake. I'm telling this story exactly the way I want to tell it. But what about, it's not that story. It's another story.
I've set things up for myself in a rather problematic way by pantsing a time travel story.
Oh, God.
Yeah. In which that's what It Never Rains is. It's a time travel story in which, and this is true, the timeline cannot be changed. So anything that anybody goes back to the past and does always happened in the past. Which means that I can't cheat and say, oh, she just changed the past. Right.
That must make your head hurt.
Yeah.
Oh. My brain's hurting. I can just imagine. It's like, I'm thinking over there now. It's like, so Like, how do you try to avoid mistakes with that?
Blind luck is one of the ways.
Blind luck. Okay.
I need to go back and read over what I've written in the last few years, because I'm sure I've forgotten some things that are going to have to happen soon, or that did happen in the past and that actually happened in the future because characters from the future went back to the past, and I've forgotten them. And I should have done an outline at the beginning, but I didn't. I tried to do an outline, and it was like, no, I don't like outlines. I hate them. I'm not doing an outline. I am pantsing this time travel story because that sounds sane. So,
I want to give you a hug. I really do right now. It's like it'll be okay. It will be okay.
It will.
Yeah. Holy crap. So sometimes with my outlines, I don't actually write them. I draw them. I'm a terrible artist, but that actually makes it more memorable that way. Because as long as I know what the key points are I'm okay with little mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, you don't need a perfect story, just a good one. But
yes, that should be on a t-shirt. Perfect. Good one.
Yeah. It's well, hey, thank you. Maybe I'll do that because that's, I mean, no matter like I still like even with novels, like I have some real-time hardcovers. Right? I'm into the story. I see a glaring typo. I can't unsee it. It's there. It's always there. Now, later editions correct that stuff. You can do that.
Yeah.
But at first edition, that mistake's there. Forever.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, younger me is like, it's not perfect. Older me, meh. It doesn't need to be perfect. The story's here. So let's just keep it that way. I mean, I don't need there's nothing in this life's perfect. You know, it rains in damn inconvenient times. Sometimes when I cook something, it doesn't work the way I had in mind. I had this master plan, and it not literally, thank goodness, but it's blown up in my face from time to time, and life's not meant to be perfect. And so why would fiction be too?
Yeah, I have some perfectionist friends who have a hard time finishing anything because it's not perfect. You can't ever finish anything. You get to the point where it's good enough, and then you stop. But that doesn't. It's not going to be perfect. The beautiful, perfect story inside your head is never going to make its way onto the paper because language is imperfect, and the ways we express things are imperfect, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with something that's good enough for now.
And that's, I think, life in general. Like I threw away a long time ago the concept of perfection just for that reason. It's your enemy. I mean, trying to do the absolute best you can, that's great. We all can do that. But I'm going to miss stuff. No matter how good I get, I'm always going to miss stuff. And there just comes a point where you say everything you need to say. And that's it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, you just sort of throw yourself gleefully down the hill and hope that eventually you hit the bottom.
Yes.
That makes no sense at all.
Maybe. I feel with you, you're the kind of person that you just like, I'm gonna do the thing, and let's see what happens. I feel that way with you. That's a big part of who you are.
Yeah, that does tend to be the way that I create things. I'm good at trying to do this. Sometimes you make a bet with yourself. Sort of.
You okay, it's what's your bet? I gotta ask this.
I bet that I can make a book that has this property in it that no one's ever done. I don't know, it's like there's this children's author, Diana Wynne Jones, who's like a fantasy author.
Yes.
Who,
I've read
basically, every story she writes is a bet she's made with herself. Like, I bet that I can set a book outside of time and it will still make sense. I bet that I can have a book with a protagonist who doesn't know which of the characters in the story she is until near the end of the story. And she wins the bet every time.
Yeah.
So I want to be like her.
You just make bets with yourself. So the bet with the comic was, I'm gonna write a time travel story without an outline, and it will work out just fine.
I bet I can pants a time travel story.
Yes, you can. I kind of did that when I was a teenager. My first novel was a time travel story.
Yeah.
And I came up with this really cool idea that for me, that time was energy, and my villain tried to actually destroy time. So
sure.
Yeah, that was how it made it. I kind of made it work. It's that novel's in that drawer of everybody writes their bad novel. Although there's some stuff in there I'm really proud of, right? I'm like, I had a lot of guts back then, but I still did it.
I have a whole shelf like that.
Yeah. Shelf. One of the things at Creative Inc. in Vancouver, I was fortunate to see was a lot of great authors read some from their terrible stuff, like the stuff that was really bad. And Crystal Wallace is the one that came to mind the most. Like, she owned it. She wrote something like a 12-year-old, and dang it, she read it like a 12-year-old. It was fantastic to listen to. It's like, okay, that's embracing your bad. That's awesome. I respect that.
Yeah, we have an event here that we do that about once a year, where all the authors read the stuff they wrote when they were kids, and it's always hilarious.
I'm trying to find my story, because this is what I did. I wrote a story about dolphins saving the world. It's like, hey, that's cool. I was 8 years old, but my mistake. This is a devastating mistake, I have to admit, because now I have no idea what was said. I tried to have the dolphins talk like they were actually dolphins, like in their sonar. It seemed like a good idea when I was 8, and then I read it aloud. That wasn't a good idea.
So your story is full of dolphin dialogue.
That's right.
Dolphin.
Yeah. Yeah, because I used to be in oceanography as a kid, so I remember they almost sound like dolphins are like whistles and clicks and stuff like that. So can you just imagine that, like writing that down on the page, and thinking, I'm so clever.
This is gonna sell 1 million copies.
I was 8. It's okay. You can make that mistake at 8 years old. Then I had to read that out loud in the class, and I was like, this blew up in my face. But now, see, what I want to do is, I'll own that, and what I'll do is I will get the actual recording of dolphins like chatter, and then I'll do a terrible kung fu translations, but on the spot. So what?
That would totally work.
Yeah, see, and maybe even get the audience involved. It's like, say what you want, because I don't know what I said here. It's like I don't know. I could make something up, but instead I'm just gonna do like terrible kung fu translations, because who doesn't like kung fu translations?
Everybody likes kung fu translations.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Embracing your bad, right? You gotta embrace it. I mean, it's 8. I'm sure my grammar and stuff's gonna be terrible too. Be like, ooh, this is cringy. Okay, this is gonna hurt. Ow, 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 ow. Okay, fun stuff. Hit the play button. Hear the dolphin thing going, and then just do a very bad kung fu voice. So, I don't know. Just that. I see. Again, you have to embrace your bad too. You have to embrace it.
Yeah, I like. Sometimes we do panels in which people are like, but I want to write a novel, sell 1 million copies, and you're like, have you ever written a novel before? Well, no. Well, your first novel is going to suck, right? Well, why would it suck? Well, it would suck because you've never written a novel before. But you have to write a sucky novel before you can go on to write a slightly less sucky novel, and then you write a slightly less sucky novel, and eventually you'll write a novel that doesn't entirely suck. But you have to practice And if you don't go through all of that sucking, you're never going to get to the point where you stop sucking. And the expectation that you'll just be able to sit down and pump out a story that's perfect is what I think stops a lot of people, or makes a lot of people kind of deluded.
Well, it's just like, well, people tend to forget if you're really good at something, right? So, or someone who makes it look easy, that's a lot of practice. That's a lot of practice. Like it's easy sometimes to see it in sports when you watch those, or even dance or improv. The people that make that stuff look like easy have been doing it forever and ever and ever and ever, and they still make mistakes, but they're just so comfortable doing it. It's almost like muscle memory.
It is muscle memory.
Yeah.
Especially for things like music and dance. You build it into your body, and when it comes out, it looks like it's effortless. But that's 30 years of practice behind that effortlessness. So
it's like effortlessness is the ultimate illusion. I mean, when you're really good at somebody, you master that illusion. I look like someone like Stephen King, like as a novelist. Very clean writer. Very clean. But he didn't get there overnight. If you look at Christine versus anything at your age today, Christine has lots of mistakes in comparison. But I think one of the challenges I think all creators have is our voice changes and evolves. And I think what keeps any creative person creative is the fact that there's always something that needs to be said. Like, we have something inside us that needs to be said. And it has to be different, a little bit different each and every time. Otherwise, we're saying the exact same thing. And although technically we might be better, right? For some reason, the original stories have more resonance. It's realer somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. You look back at stuff you wrote a few years ago, and you weren't bad at it. It was just you were a different person when you wrote that stuff. And like, I have novels sitting on my shelf that are probably okay. I don't know, because I don't want to look at them ever again. But I was a different person when I wrote them. And so revisiting stuff from 10 years ago can sometimes feel like going back and reading something written by a stranger, someone who isn't you anymore.
Well, it's so true. I mean, and I think there's a window we all have when we tell our story to do the best we can with it, and I think it's about 3 years. After about 3 years, we have to move on, because if we don't, unless we're doing like a trilogy or an epic fantasy series where we're completely immersed in the world, we're telling a story as we go, and we're evolving as we're telling that story in those situations. But for one story, for one novel, I think we only have X amount of time to really do that right. And if we don't, we miss the opportunity, because our voice changes, and once our voice changes, we can go back and try to make it better, but it's kind of like ripping the foundation up. You're taking the foundation that was already there, and that voice of who you are at that point in time, should have a say with it. You know what I mean? It should be a part of that novel. It's why it worked when it did work. And it's one of the hardest things to do as a writer, going back to your early stuff and make it better without ruining it.
Yeah, my first novel was accepted about 5 years after I wrote it, and I hadn't actually looked at the manuscript for a few years, and then I got the contract, and so I looked at the manuscript again, and I was like, oh my god, my characters all sound British. Why do they sound British? Why? Why do these 14-year-old Canadians sound like British children? So somehow I had to change that and make them less British.
You from the UK?
No, I am not. I'm from British Columbia.
So okay, so how did you get them to pull off? How did you pull off British?
Well, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't really British, but somehow the intonation of how I was writing sounded a little a little British to me now. It didn't when I was originally writing it, when I was like 35, but 5 years later it was like, oh my god, these children sound British. So
Oh god. Yeah, that's just
it's fine. I fixed it. I made them sound less British.
So you made them sound less British. So,
I think I did.
You think? Okay. So
maybe I'll read it again in 10 years and I'll go, oh my god, these characters sound British. I don't know. Maybe there's my whole process of evolution in writing is going to be becoming less British as I go.
Well, if you start mentioning stuff like quid, then you know you went too far. That's how you can tell. If he's like, oh, yeah. I'm doing their slang. Why am I doing their slang? And then maybe the secret origin of Kari Maaren. She's secretly British.
Yes, that's what it is.
That's totally what it is. Well, Miss Kari, I think we have an interview here. What do you think?
I think so.
Okay.
So I will say one more thing.
Uh-oh.
It's Kari Maaren.
Kari Maaren?
Kari Maaren. No one ever gets it right, so sometimes I just like to say.
No. You know what? You should. Like that. Honestly, yeah. It looks like a version of Kari. So I apologize for that.
No, everybody gets it wrong. It's Norwegian, so.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So it's just it. I mean, it is like, look. My last name is Pantelleresco.
Yes.
So people get that wrong all the time. It's just one of those. I always feel bad when I get a name wrong because for me it's like, well, my name's always gets wrong. Usually in terms of spelling, not usually saying it. It's like
you probably get various numbers of L's, R's, T's, and yeah.
Actually, do you want to know the biggest mistake people make? Yeah, it's you spell my last name Pantall. I say my name Pantelleresco. So what happens is usually you get to the T and they think E because it sounds like an E. And that right. My personal favorite all time though, like in terms of people saying my last name, is two of them. One of them is Ken Telamigo. It just phonetically, it just like, okay, that was good. That was good. I can't deny it. That was good. And my all-time favorite, a friend of mine, or a person was introduced to me in grade 6, and he tried to say my last name. It's like, screw it, Josh Alphabet. And I was like, you couldn't be mad at that. You just can't be mad at that.
I think those of us with difficult names collect these little stories of the way people screw our names up badly. Like I've once had a student turn my name into Mari Kazreem.
That's fantastic.
A cool name, but it's not mine. I graduated once as Sari Maaren.
That's impressive.
I have never graduated under my actual name.
Yes.
I have never won an award under my actual name. No one can say it. It's a curse. It's this weird curse thing. And once a student actually put my name down as Dr. Maurice.
That's good. The one I usually get all the time is Pants to the Rescue. That's the one I usually get when people are introduced make fun of my name. I've been called Mr. Pants. I've been called, just Pants. I've been called, Pantyhose. Like I've had all these variations of my name throughout the years. It's been a bonus thing in spelling when spelling was a subject back in school. It's been a bonus. It's been a spelling bee tiebreaker. That was evil. That was evil. The teacher that did that was so... It was the older grades, and I've never been glowered at so hard in my life.
How dare you have a 5-syllable name?
It's like, how dare you? It's like, oh my god. It's like... So, I can look at the positives, but yeah, it's just part of the deal. Your name stands out. And that's actually a good thing. Right? But... there does come
with a price.
Yes, it does. It always, everything does, right? I mean, what I think the real test of character is how you handle dealing with the consequences of your actions. That's it.
Yep.
That's what adulting is. I figured it out or something.
I've never tried to adult.
So you're like me, ice cream forever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously. Why would I give up ice cream? I mean, it's the perfect food, and why should only children get to enjoy it?
Well, my Twitter is about ice cream and Baileys together. It's actually quite wonderful. You should try it if you haven't.
Yes, I've had that before.
Yes.
Yes.
It's delicious, right? So, but it's one of those. I mean, we're creative people, and if we don't maintain we have to be kids on some level, you know, or childlike, I should say. That's the word. We have to grow up. We all have to grow up a little bit. That's just life. You have to, but it doesn't mean you have to get rid of your innocence and your wonder and the things that made you kid-like, because that's the cool stuff. And if you can keep that, I think you never completely lose your youth.
Yeah, that works.
You go with that? It's like, I'll go with that.
Let's go with that. Yeah, that sounds good. That is a good philosophy. Also, I do write for children and young people, so.
What age group?
Well, that's a good question. I would say younger teens. My publisher would say adults, because my publisher is like, oh, look, it's a time travel story with 14-year-old characters. Let's market it to adults. I don't.
Your publisher loves you?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that.
But yeah, I would say teenagers or preteens.
Okay. So mature enough to look at adult things, but still with an optimism that gets lost for a lot of adults.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Not all children are optimistic.
No, they're not. Not all of them, but they're all, well, almost all of them, I should say. There is a little bit of an innocence there that's just not present when you're an adult. So, almost, anyways.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go with that. We will go with that.
Yeah, let's agree that's a consensus on that one.
Yeah, so let's go with that. So what's coming up for you? Like, what's your next big release?
Right now there isn't one. I wrote a sequel to my novel, and my publisher said no thank you, so I am now trying to figure out what to do. Yeah.
So self-publish?
I do not really want to do that, not because I am a snob, but because I have done it with comics, and I was not good at it. I hated self-promotion with the fire of 1,000 suns.
I
am not good at it at all. I always feel like I'm doing the wrong thing. I lost thousands of dollars on the comics.
Well,
because I didn't do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a common problem. Like, I've interviewed a lot of creative people, and marketing's always awkward, right? It just is, because you have to, so you have to be willing to talk about yourself in a way that doesn't feel, especially when you first do it, legitimate, right? It doesn't feel legit. It doesn't feel honest. Because you don't think highly of yourself, but it's what you have to emphasize when you're selling. You have to emphasize the work. You have to emphasize yourself, right?
Yeah.
The catch, this is something that I'm a professional wrestling fan. I like pro wrestling, but this is I find it's very relevant when it comes to sales. So I remember back when I was a kid, when I was watching wrestling in the 80s and early 90s, you'd have these really colorful characters that aren't, like, you could not make the stuff up you were seeing on television. And you saw these grown men, primarily, some women too, talking about how they're going to kick the crap out of somebody at this arena at 7 o'clock. It's absurd. Like, it's the most absurd thing you'll ever see. On the flip side, though, and if you were to look at what they're doing, what they're really doing is they're communicating the belief they have in what they're doing. And I think the real challenge with marketing as an artist is you have to show your audience, whoever they are, that you believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? That you're out there and that you believe in what you're doing. And if you approach it like that, even with a publisher, right? That has to be carried. That has to be somewhat carried as well, because you're still dealing with the public. You're still dealing with people, and because of this, if you don't believe in what you're saying, right? The audience knows it. If you're uncomfortable with it, the audience feels it, and if they but if you believe in it, the audience feels that too. So the challenge is, and even with whether you're with a publisher or not, is having that belief with you no matter where you're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, it sometimes feels, the things that you're saying when you're marketing yourself feel fake or false, or that you're bragging in some way, even when you're just doing the "please buy my book, this is a book I have written" thing. But and we've been taught not to brag about ourselves, and that you shouldn't have too much pride in your stuff. Pride is bad, and yet the marketing is all that. Like, this is why the thing I have created is awesome, and you should all buy it. But without being obnoxious about it, and spamming social media with how awesome your book is, because then nobody will buy it.
I just find it's about being yourself, like, more than anything else. It's like, what part of myself can I bring out to the equation? Like, I try to make my stuff fun, because I learned a very valuable lesson. My very first signing was in Calgary, Alberta, 2003. I self-published a book. It was a book of poetry, and I was a complete, like, I did everything wrong. Like, I was a complete flake in terms of advertising, build up, you name it. Like, I just did everything wrong you could possibly do, except for this, and this stuck with me. So the store was an essential oil store, located in an area that you could not see the building at all. There's no signs, nothing. So it had some challenges. But I'm like, how can I get people to come to this store, right? So what I did was, we printed out these big things of arrows, and I taped them to the street, right? And here's the thing. People followed it.
I wonder where this arrow goes.
Exactly. It taught me a very valuable lesson. And I use this with everything I do. People do not want to be told to buy something.
No.
But people will interact with you if it looks fun. And I've kept that with me everywhere you go. Because then, once it's fun, and once you have a way to break the ice, then you can talk to them. Then you can open up. And you may not get that sale that day, but you will get that sale eventually. Because they will believe in you. And that, I think, is the way to do it. I learned that all because I taped signs to the street.
Yeah, well, what you did there is you created a story.
Yes.
People had to know the end of the story.
Exactly.
Where do these arrows go? There's a mystery. I must solve the mystery. And even if they're like, oh, it's a poetry reading, bye, they'll remember the time that they followed the arrows to solve the mystery.
Exactly. And so I've learned this, and it was like, I use it all the time. Like, that philosophy, anything I do in terms of marketing. All right. Because I realize that what I'm actually selling is me. The books are secondary.
Yeah, your brand.
Not even just your brand. Like people pay for you. I learned that a long time ago. It's just like it's not your fans, the people that really, really come and support you. They like your books, but they really like you. It's true that you did something that they believe in, and if you keep that in mind and utilize whatever it is that you're doing, you'll find your people, and when you find your people, you'll find your base, and that's it.
Yeah, no, I've heard people say things like let's say you have a comic and you have a readership for your comic, and let's just say that for the sake of argument that you have 100 people reading your comic. You probably let's say you have 1,000, just to make it more optimistic. You have 1,000 people reading your comic, so 10% of those people are your fans. The rest of them are your readers, and it's great to have those readers, but they will not buy your stuff. Your fans will.
Yes.
So it's the people who believe in you and what you're doing and are so invested in the thing that you're creating that they will buy your T-shirts and your books and support you if you do a Kickstarter or something like that. So you want to make more readers into fans.
Exactly. And when we do that, and when you do that, and the only way you really have to do that is interact and tell stories with them, play with them.
Yeah.
Right? That's it. That's all there is to it. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's
it's less good.
Well, the thing is, right? It's I kind of equate it to baseball. Like no, you just all you can do is take the swing at the bat. You can't really control. Like, who's going to catch what's going to happen once the bat's swung? So maybe you hit a home run. Maybe you hit a single. Maybe you strike out. Maybe someone catches the ball and fouls you out. You don't know. But all you can do is keep swinging at the bat.
Yeah, no, that goes for... Well, I was activity panel convention a week or so ago, and one person in the audience was asking, well, what happens if you write something in a story and then you publish a story and people are misreading it? What do you do about that? It's like, dude, it's not your story anymore. You put it out into the world, you hit the ball, and the ball went to a place you didn't expect it to go. So you just have to live with that, and it's fine. It now belongs to your fans, and they can do whatever they want with it. And if that bothers you, then that becomes your problem rather than their problem.
Exactly. I mean that's just how it goes. So, on that note, I hope. On that note, I do hope though with what you're doing, you figure it out and you find it. You find a good home for what you've done.
I hope so.
When sometimes one door closes and another new one opens. But any way you choose to do it, I wish you well.
All right.
On that note, Kari, there, you got that right. Right? Yeah. So, Miss Kari, talk about what your projects so people can see what you're doing and how people can find you.
All right, so I am on the internet in a lot of places. My website, which is seriously out of date, is Kari Maaren, KariMaaran.com. And otherwise, I have a webcomic called It Never Rains, which is about a time-traveling teenager named Rose. I also have a Finnish webcomic called Wesu Brathurst, which is still online and you can find. My novel's name is Weave a Circle Round. It came out in 2017, and it is also a time travel story. I didn't do that on purpose. Weird fate things happened, and I ended up with 2 time travel stories at the same time. But it is in bookstores, and I have some music online as well, which you can find via my YouTube channel, or my 2 albums on Bandcamp, which have the strange names of Beowulf Pulled My Arm Off.
Sorry, I can't help it. That's hilarious. And do you have like Twitter or Instagram or anything like that?
I have Twitter, and that's Angry Kim, Angry Kem, which are my initials. I have Facebook. I have some page, like I have not an author page, a musician page on Facebook. I do not have Instagram, but someday I probably will. That's Twitter is probably the best to go for social media.
So find Angry Kim.
Angry Kim, yes.
All right.
This podcast for this month is sponsored by Third Space. It is a comedy world-building podcast in which your hosts, Kevin Weir and Jeremy Berkeley, create worlds based on tropes and concepts from movies, television, video games, books, and more. What does that mean exactly? It means you can expect worlds where humans level up, mascots are real, animals grant riches, and Skeletor wants you to rise up against the bourgeois. Why? Just cuz. It's also home to the Third Space World Generator, where using the power of the RNGesus from the internet, Kevin and Jeremy create brand new worlds from scratch. Third Space can be found on thirdspacepodcast.com or on the podcast app of your choice. And that was my conversation with Kari Maaren, the first Aurora finalist of the month, and definitely not the last. Kari, you were great. You're welcome back anytime. Thank you very, very much for doing this. So, we got some more stuff to talk about here before it's all said and done. My t-shirt's out. I have a merchandise page, jpenteloresco.redbubble.com. You can buy my t-shirts, not just my Sparkle Sparkle t-shirt. And yes, I can't believe I'm saying Sparkle Sparkle just as much as you are. But I also have some joshing merchandise as well, whether it's shirts, cups, other things as well. I want to take a moment to thank Kayla Lynn. Kayla is Abstract Azure online. You should definitely check her out. She's an amazing designer. She went through a lot of trouble to make the shirt. I had a blast working with her, and I want to just take an extra moment to thank her very much for everything she did. Check it out, like I said, jpenteloresco.redbubble.com. It was definitely a fun project to get rolling with. And that'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support my podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. Among them, let's start off with just the new stuff. My sponsors, Indie Imprint, Claudia Morgan, Third Space. Check out Third Space's podcast. Check out Claudia Morgan at claudiamorgan.com. Check out Indie Imprint at indieimprint.com. Do that. Subscribe to the podcast. You can do so on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic, and other podcast apps. Whatever you'd like to do, like it, review it, share it. Definitely appreciated. Number one. Number two, my merchandise page is jpenteloresco.redbubble.com. I have merchandise for Just Joshing. For my next book, The Cloud Diver, is there now. More to come soon. Speaking of The Cloud Diver, that was the next release. That will be coming soon as well. As is, you can get The Watcher, Storm Dancer, Wandering God, courtesy of mirrorworldpublishing.com. My Twitter and Instagram are at jpenteloresco. My Facebook page is Joshua Penteloresco, author, podcaster. Feel free to say hi. And for everything else, guys, thank you very much for listening. Stay inspired. Keep doing your thing. And remember, right, you make a difference.
Josh.